2 weeks ago on Mother's Day, many of my remarks centered on our experience of grief. The next day, I looked ahead to today's sermon and realized it would be Memorial Day, so I fear I'm being typecast. Unitarian Universalist minister and theologian Forrest Church told us, religion is the human response to being alive and having to die. So perhaps it should not seem odd that one of the reasons we gather here in community is to ponder how our death and the death of others informs the way we live today. But we also gather in community to remind ourselves and one another that, in Dr. King's words, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. So I promise you, my next sermon will be celebratory. It will be Pride Month, and I'll be talking about the 10th anniversary of marriage equality. First, allow me to take a step back and ask, why do we set aside specific days to remember the dead? Why do so many of our holidays ask us to remember those who have died? We honor those who died in military service. We remember those who died too soon. We honor iconic leaders, President's Day, and the legacy of a slain civil rights leader on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Father's Day, Independence Day, and, as I mentioned before, Mother's Day, are days when we often honor those who have passed. The early Christian custom of commemorating each martyr annually on the day of their death gave way to the calendar of saints. This is a traditional method of organizing a liturgical year by associating each day with one or more saints. So every day of the year was a day to honor the dead. Now, before moving to Texas, I really was not familiar with Dia de los Muertos, when family and friends gathered to pay their respects and remember the beloveds who have died. This past year, I really came to appreciate the ofrenda, the home altar graced with marigolds and the favorite foods and beverages of the departed. Nor do I really remember acknowledging All Souls Day in my youth, although I always started designing my Halloween costume months in advance. How could they not have known? So I would count this as the first of our reasons to remember the dead, to mourn them. The loss of someone close leaves a void in our lives. I just spoke at length about grieving, so I won't say much more, except how important it is to mourn in our own way, using our own timeline. But not only to mourn, but to celebrate their lives. When planning memorial services, families will often ask that it be called a celebration of the person's life. I think that's why I've grown to love the ofrenda, using it to remember and celebrate the wonderful people we lost. We also remember the dead to know our story. My great and great-great-grandfathers owned a post office and general store. Years later, the house my grandparents lived in from the time my mother was just a baby was built nearby. Because of the post office, the area took their name and was known as Pruitt, Kentucky. And while the post office and general store are long gone, the road there is still called Pruitt Road. Knowing parts of my story gives me a kind of grounding that is difficult to describe. People who were adopted as babies sometimes yearn to find their story. While they typically consider their adoptive parents their real parents, they sometimes long to find out more. This is something I did not write in my prepared notes because I just thought of it in between the services talking to Elaine. But this stole is made from the neckties of my father and Conrad's father. I also have a stole that is made from the garments and sewing projects of my two grandmothers. So these are ways for me to remember them and to remember their stories as well. So that's why I wanted to walk out from behind there and show it to you. Our story is important, so I encourage you to ask the older folks in your life to tell stories, to know what life was like before you were around. You'll appreciate having done that later. We also remember the dead to face mortality. I've told many of you this one-on-one. After my parents died, I realized my time on earth here is limited. Well, of course, I knew that in my head. After all, I had been a hospital chaplain and had seen people of all ages, shapes, and sizes pass away. But my parents' deaths made it hit home, and the inevitable became more tangible. I realized I wasn't spending enough time with Conrad, and it led me to move up my retirement. Also, we remember the dead to gain wisdom. I find myself reflecting on the lives of my parents and grandparents to learn. So this is one of the places where having asked their stories is important. Learned not just from the things they intentionally set out to teach me, but from looking at how they lived their lives. When I'm tempted to second-guess their choices, though, I think about how the options for them looked very different than the options that I might have had. And I must point out the wealth of knowledge and wisdom found in books, which is why libraries are so important. The author's influence can live long after they are gone, from ancient sacred scriptures to from the world's religions, to Shakespeare, to Herman Melville, to your next summer beach paperback. These words live on beyond the lives of their authors. My brother died at age 17, the day before my 22nd birthday. His death made me reconsider many things I believed. I no longer believe things happen only for the best or even for a reason. I no longer believe things would make sense if we just knew God's plan, because God is always good. I came to believe that really horrible things just happen. Randy's death provided a reason to reconsider what I believed, and that significantly altered my theology, and I believe it made me wiser. We remember the dead to honor them. Days such as Memorial Day are set aside to honor those who gave their lives and whose lives were far shorter than they deserved. Cultural and civil rights leaders, saints and religious exemplars, and of course our beloved ancestors. Some of the most compelling architecture was designed and built to honor the dead. 2 years ago on Memorial Day, I described the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Now, if you've not been there in person, I imagine that you've seen a photograph. The memorial is 2 black granite walls engraved with the names of those service members who died or remained missing as a result of their service in the war. Visiting it was, for me, unexpectedly heartrending. On May 18th, 2018, a mass shooting in Galveston County on Santa Fe High School's campus left 8 students and 2 teachers dead. Plans were revealed just this week for a permanent memorial, which will feature 10 oversized feathers, 1 for each life lost. These places provide a place to remember and honor the dead, and provide a place for grief and healing. Finally, I would contend that we remember the dead to seek justice. Last week, the antebellum mansion on the Nottoway plantation in Louisiana burned to the ground. Built in 1859 by sugar magnate John Hamden Randolph, the estate was powered by the forced labor of more than 150 enslaved people, a fact often glossed over in tourist brochures. Some see poetic justice in the ashes of a plantation that, according to many, never meaningfully confronted its legacy of slavery. Turning a blind eye to the atrocities committed there, the property was being marketed as a wedding venue and luxury getaway. Remembering the dead enslaved people who were exploited in such places propels us to continue to work for justice. Well over Well over 500,000 Americans died in the 2 world wars, fighting fascism. Remembering these dead propels us to fight against fascism now that it has been embraced in our country. As I read this week, all gave some gave all, one gave nothing, and he wants a military parade. So there are many reasons to take time to remember the dead. And today, we take time to do so. 5 years ago, we combined the Memorial Day remembrance and candle ritual with one to remember those who had died from COVID-19. We will do that again today. Also, I will again expand the ritual to include more of those who saw their lives cut short far too early, along with a pledge to work toward an end to the pervasive violence. We begin by acknowledging that Memorial Day is set aside to honor and mourn the military personnel who perished while serving in the United States Armed Forces. Over 1.3 million have perished in the wars in which the U.S. have been involved. We mourn not only for the loss of life, but for the fact that many of them died fighting a fascism that has made its way onto our shores. We remember them and thank them for the sacrifice they made. Our hearts go out to those who loved and still love them. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from falling hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. We pledge to hold the torch high and work toward an end to war and violence. We light a candle for all those who died in service to their fellow citizens of the United States. Next, we mourn the military around the world who perished while serving their own country. Since 1800, more than 37 million people worldwide have died while actively fighting in wars. We remember them, and our hearts go out to those who love them. We pledge to work toward an end to war and violence. To be free from violence is the duty of every man. No thought of revenge, hatred, or ill should arise in our minds. Injuring others gives rise to hatred. We light a candle for all those who fought wars around the globe. Next, we honor and mourn those who perished from the violence of fierce and unpredictable weather, which we have seen firsthand here in Texas. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has confirmed there were 27 weather and climate disasters in 2024 that created at least $1 billion in damage. These include 1 drought, 1 flood, 17 severe storms, 5 tropical cyclones, 1 wildfire, and 2 winter storms. They caused a tragic 568 deaths across the country. We light a candle for all those who lost their lives in weather-related deaths. Next, we honor and mourn those civilians around the world who have perished from violence. Many are due to military conflict or terrorism, unwitting victims of their leaders' inability to peaceably solve differences. Some civilians are murdered by someone they know or someone sworn to protect them. Some by strangers on the street or in their homes or schools. In the U.S., between 2019 and 2020, during the early part of the stress-filled pandemic, there was a 30% jump in murders. This was the largest single-year increase in more than a century. Thankfully, since then, there has been a dramatic drop in homicides, but thousands continue to perish due to violence. I believe that I must here highlight the epidemic of violence against trans people. The Human Rights Campaign reports the deaths of at least 32 transgender and gender-expansive people whose lives were tragically taken through violent means, including gun and intimate partner violence, in 2024 alone. In that year, 78% of victims were people of color, 56% were Black transgender women, and 63% were killed with a gun. And I again mention Yaron Lishchinsky and Sarah Milgram, the couple about to begin a new life together, callously gunned down in Washington. We pledge to work for common sense gun laws so that this violence might end. We light a candle for all those who lost their lives due to violence. Last year, when we lit this candle, there were almost 705 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the world. Today, there have been more than 777 million cases and more than 7.1 million deaths. There have been over 1.2 million deaths in the United States from the coronavirus. We again light a large candle for all those killed by these infectious diseases across the world. The last time I preached, I described anticipatory grief, which is grief before a loss. People typically experience anticipatory grief when given a worrying diagnosis for themselves or a loved one. While profoundly sad, I feel compelled to light a candle in anticipation that there will be many who will lose their lives due to incompetent and uncaring leadership. According to Nature.com, the United States spent roughly $12 billion on global health in 2024. Without that yearly spending, roughly 25 million people could die in the next 15 years, according to models that have estimated the impact of such cuts on programs for tuberculosis, HIV, family planning, and maternal and child health. And according to the Center for American Progress, Medicaid cuts would result in widespread coverage losses, which could lead to roughly 32,200 deaths from reduced federal funding each year. We again light a large candle with great sorrow for all those who should not have to die so soon. We have lit these candles to remember those whose lives ended too soon. All lives are precious, and we mourn the futures that could have been but will not be. We have lit these candles to face the difficult reality of our present and past, where there is war, pandemic, and violence. We have lit these candles to rekindle our source of hope for the future as we join together for a better and more peaceful tomorrow. We have pledged to hold the torch high and work toward an end to war and violence. For this hour, we came to remember, to celebrate, to honor, to praise, to give thanks, to refuse to give up, to steady ourselves, keepers of hope, brave builders of this still possible world. I ask you to join me in wrapping our fingers around that still bright thread of hope. Amen.